All right, on this episode of Bouks Talking Bouts, we have a big event coming up, and that goes in Victoria, British Columbia, over at the Q Center. Rise FC4 taking over. Connelly versus Owens is at the top of the marquee. And to break things down a little bit, I'm talking to one of the commentators for the show, James Lynch. How's it going, James?
It's going well, man. Dylan, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's great having you on, and it seems like you've been part of Rise FC from the get-go in a certain way, because you were doing a lot of media coverage for the initial show and then also the second show, getting Sabah on for a variety of previews. I'm wondering, when did the dialogue get going on to have you as part of the broadcast team for Rise?
I can tell you the exact moment. I was in Calgary last year covering UFC on Fox 31. That was the Alvarez-Poirier card. Savage but I sent me a text interested in doing commentary, and I jumped at it, and the timing of it was great too, because at that point I was moving from Toronto back home to Vancouver, so it was, everything kind of worked out. I think he knew that I was moving back, and so it's been great. I'm super thankful for the opportunity. I've done 2 shows now. I did the Rise FC2 card, and I did the Rise FC3 card that took place earlier this year, and it's been awesome. I'm really looking forward to this event in Victoria coming up here on the 27th.
Yeah, and I noticed for the Rise FC2 card, you did color commentary with Gary Mangett, and then you did play-by-play for Rise FC3. What did you notice as being the biggest distinct differences between being in the color commentary position versus doing play-by-play?
Yeah, it was kind of a reverse role. So kind of to give some context about the Rise FC2 card, so Gary wasn't supposed to be doing the show. I think Darcy was supposed to do that show as well, and there was just some conflict, and Gary ended up having to do it at the last minute. So we kind of had to figure out which roles we wanted to do, because I did all this research and had all sort of these tidbits and everything, and then Gary was sort of doing the play-by-play. I mean, it ended up working out fine, but it was just one of those things where we kind of had to figure out our style. And then the last show, things were really organized, and I was able to do a bit of play-by-play and everything. And for me, it's just being aware of kind of what's happening, really focusing in on having those tidbits that of research and everything like that, but also describing what's happening, and also just really trying to build good chemistry. Because if you remember on that show, we also had Micah Brakefield as well, sort of as the third man in the booth. So I really wanted to make sure we weren't talking over each other, and we were also sort of keeping the flow of things going adequately. And it was a great learning experience. I learned so much from that show specifically, just with everything, because I have no we're talking that was my second show. I had no real commentary experience before that, so it's kind of learn as you go. And I mean, I've heard a lot of broadcasts, obviously watching the UFC and other events, but it was just sort of learn on the fly. And I think even for this event, I'll be even better than the last time.
Were there any preconceived notions you had going into doing commentary gigs that ended up proving themselves to be false, or conversely, was there anything that materialized where you're like, oh, I didn't necessarily know this would be a consideration as I'm doing the task? Was there anything on that end?
That's a really good question, and that's something I really thought of. I think for me, just sort of the biggest thing is just again, being organized. I mean, my background, even outside of MMA and all this, I worked in the television industry for a while, so I sort of had an understanding of how things went on behind the scenes, and we certainly had to deal with that, because there were times when we'd have to throw to videos and things like that. I think the biggest thing is just having everyone on the same page, really kind of knowing when to speak, when not to. I think the biggest thing for me is just I talk really fast as it is, so I kind of had to slow things down a little bit, and I think also just kind of feeding off what other people are saying and making sure that what you're saying is accurate. I mean, there was a few times I think where I said things that were kind of not 100% correct, so that's stuff that I just have to get used to as I'm more comfortable doing these shows.
Yeah, absolutely, and want to talk about some of these fights here for sure, because the top of the marquee fight I find quite compelling. You got Tristan Connelly, who's taking on Dewan Owens, and Dewan, not altogether unfamiliar with the Rise FC cage, defeated Sabah Fadai by split decision in his second last outing there, and just, seems like a really intriguing fight all around. Tristan Connelly, a well-traveled guy, checkmate Vancouver, so comes from a reputable facility and 3-fight win streak. What are your thoughts on this top of the marquee bout for Rise FC4?
Well, I say this, as unbiased as possible, but this is really an amazing card. I was in Las Vegas last week covering UFC 239, and I ran into Cole Smith because I went to Extreme Couture to, do some interviews, and we were both talking about how great this card is, top to bottom, especially those top 3 fights. I mean, that's as good as it gets for Canadian MMA. And as far as the main event goes, this is a really intriguing and interesting matchup. You potentially have 2 guys here who could make that leap to the UFC. You've got Tristan Connelly, 12-6 record. He's won 7 of his last 8. The only loss in between there was to Shane Campbell, and it's so interesting how the world works that they now train together a little bit at Revolution. But Connelly's coming off a big win himself. Jusola. He took that fight in May for Final Fight Championship. Really impressive win there over a veteran who had fought in Bellator and a few other promotions. Connelly's also the Cage Sport lightweight champion. He's really put things together, and the thing that I really like is that the timing of this sort of run of his is just going so well, and he's facing a guy in Owens who has looked great. Now that fight against Saba Fadai, again, completely unbiased here. I think if you ask most people in the arena, they don't think he won that fight, and I think the fact that he did get the win, and then his last fight, huge win, probably biggest of his career. Owens is coming off the win over Joe Giannetti, if you remember, was a finalist on the Ultimate Fighter last year in the I believe it was the featherweight weight class. So Owens getting a decision over him at Cage Titans 44 in June. Owens is 2-2 in his last four, but I think if you look at both fighters as far as the level of competition, I think you could argue that Owens has fought some tougher guys there. Physically they're both sort of similar. I think Connelly's 5'10", Owens is 5'8". They're both around the same age. Connelly's 33, Owens is 34. The thing that I think this is going to come down to is experience potentially. You've got Owens who has 18 wins. Connelly only has 18 fights. So we'll see if that comes into play, especially as the fight goes on later in those later rounds, with this being a title fight. But as far as a pick, I think Connelly could potentially pull this one out, just with the fact that I like who he's training with. I like the improvements he's made fight to fight, and to me, especially if he can get this to the ground, I think there's a good opportunity for him to pull this off, and hopefully, if all goes well, maybe get a spot on that Vancouver card on September 14th.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting connotations to this fight too, and also per MMA Empire, also listed as a title bout. So always good to be getting some hardware going on for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And another big fight that I'm really looking forward to is Jamie Siraj taking on Blake Sigvaldason. Obviously, Siraj, a known guy on the Canadian scene for quite a while now, and has the experience advantage over Sigvaldason. But I was quite impressed by Blake Sigvaldason, seeing him fight Cageside, and he got a pretty notable victory over there over Michael Imperato. I think he was pretty heavily slated as being a decent underdog in that fight, but ended up pulling out that victory. And people can check out that interview with Blake Sigvaldason at Liberty Multimedia, both on the page and also on the YouTube channel. But just talking about this fight a little bit, I mean, what are your thoughts on the Sigvaldason Siraj the match that they're getting going on here?
I love this fight, and I love it because it's one of those fights where you have Jamie Siraj, who's been on the cusp. He's been there for so long, so close to getting that UFC shot, 7-2 record. We've heard about him for ages. You see him on UFC broadcasting, his corner in Cage and Johnson. Like, people are aware of him. He's a guy, when you talk about top bantamweights in this country, he's certainly up there. But you've got Blake here, who has the opportunity here to steal his thunder. He's only got 4 pro fights, but you mentioned that fight against Michael Imperato, another guy that had a UFC contract, if you remember, and it was taken away from him for a variety of reasons, but that we don't need to get into here. But still, I like the fact, and both these guys are 25. So, Siraj has certainly paid his dues. I think if you look at, the bantamweights across Canada, he's one of those guys that should be close to getting that UFC shot, or at the very least, a shot on Contender Series. And now Blake has that opportunity to take that away from him. So I'm really excited about this. I actually spoke to Jamie recently. I haven't done an interview with him yet, but that's on the list. But he's pumped up about this one. I think, and to be able to fight in Victoria with the Q Center, which is such a great arena, this could be fight of the night here. And I love the fact that you have two guys who, again, really aren't afraid to stand and trade. Jamie's win over Gabe Sagman, I called it for his last fight. That was a solid win, but I think even Jamie knows that he could perform a little bit better, and I think this is a great opportunity here against a guy in Blake who himself is carrying some great momentum. So I can't wait for this one. This is really about as high level as you can get as far as Canadian MMA bantamweights.
Yeah, no, that's a spot-on assessment, absolutely. But throughout the undercard and everything like that, I notice a lot of debutante fighters, or at the very least fighters early on in their career. And I think a platform like this is really just so essential for them to get out there and really build that confidence and get that sort of experience. For people who are going to be checking out this card, who are some of the debutante fighters or the fighters early on in their career that people should be really keeping their eyes on?
Yeah, there's a couple. I saw Bryce Goujon fight last time. He obviously did come out on top in that one, but he's a guy that's very entertaining, and I think could really turn things around, taking on a fighter in Jaden Martin, who's going to be making his debut. Bryce fought Josh McKenzie, a teammate of Hakeem Dawodu, like someone who's really done quite well in his career. So no shame in losing that. So I'd be keeping an eye on him as well. I don't know too much about some of the guys that are debuting here. Josh Kiakowski, I'm glad to see him back on the card. He had a really close fight against George Alcala. I actually saw George last week in Vegas. He's an Extreme Couture guy. That fight was razor thin. That could have gone either way. And the thing with Josh is he's always in good fights. Like, you look at the 1-2 record and you think, oh, not a great start. But I mean, losing to Alcala, who again looks pretty promising out of Extreme and gets to train with some just some killers over at Extreme Couture. And then his his first loss, the Clete Bentley. I don't know if you saw that one. That was the card in Kelowna last year, or Penticton, I should say. That was a very interesting fight. And Clete Bentley's just got a lot of experience. I mean, and Cleve is another guy who trains at Extreme as well, with Sarah Morris, his fiance. So, I think those two guys, certainly want to, sort of get back on the winning track, so to speak. And I think it's interesting to see what happens here. But I love the fact, kind of just to echo, what Rise is doing. I just love that there's more Canadian MMA out there. Oftentimes the thing I always hear, and it drives me nuts, Dylan, I'm sure you hear this as well, is, there's no talent in Canada. It's just not what it used to be. I completely disagree. I think it's just, you need opportunities, and, to see Rise and to see Battlefield and see Unified and XFFC and all these promotions that are really trying to make a mark. I know TKO is trying to do their thing and PTC doing their thing in Ontario. It's just good to see more promotions giving these guys opportunities, because as we've seen now, there are more opportunities than there were years ago for fighters to get to that next level with Contender Series and other things that, could really, get these guys in the UFC and get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely frustrates me too, because I think there's a lot of great talent, but I think, especially in the Ontario scene, it was kind of dormant for a little while because of a lot of, regulatory hurdles to jump and stuff like that. But I think with some of the recent changes in combat sports laws, we're going to see Canadian MMA grow and also Ontario MMA grow by proxy.
Yeah, and it's just good to see that promotions. I know the commission stuff in Ontario is still a little bit tough. Like right now, BTC is the only show that's doing anything consistently, but they're doing a good job. I mean, they just had Kyle Prepolek make it to the UFC from their promotion. Aaron Jeffrey's going to be on Contender Series in next week, actually. So it's good to see that they're actually producing fighters that are going to that next level. TKO's got a lot of guys that have moved on from there. Marc-Andre Barrio, Charles Jourdain, Jesse Ronson's now fighting in PFL. So it's just good to see that there's sort of a steady flow of Canadians sort of getting to that next level, because there was years when that just wasn't happening. And there were promotions doing cards, but you just need that exposure as well. And I think that we're seeing that more with the streaming services and everything like that. So I'm excited to see these guys kind of get their due and get those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that this upcoming fight in particular isn't necessarily in the Chilliwack area, but to the point of BC and the decade-long history of anti-MMA bias. I was talking to Sabah about that ahead of the last card, and I think that's going to be another instance whereby the scene's going to grow, that much more out there. And yeah, to that point, big shout out to, MMA Empire, a big website that keeps up with all the Canadian MMA scene, and I understand is a big help when you're, researching for these cards.
Big time. I always give them a shout out, or it's just one guy, I guess, who's doing it. But I love to see people cover Canadian MMA. I did my best, so to speak, when I was sort of coming up, and because it really needs coverage. I mean, it's not what it used to be. You're not going to get these bigger outlets going there and talking to these guys, and the work you're doing as well, Dylan. It's just great to see that people are still, keeping the scene alive. For years, Top MMA News was one of sort of the premier sites to, get a lot of coverage. And I know now it's tough, and people move on, and people have things going on. But it is very important, and I think there is a good scene here. And I like the fact that they're doing this card in Victoria, because there's a couple notable gyms there. The one that obviously stands out is Zuma with Sarah Kaufman, and you've got Graham Spencer's got his gym over there as well. So it's just good to see that they're doing a show over there, because there is a lot of MMA fans, and I don't think the UFC is coming to Victoria anytime soon. So it's good to see that they're promoting cards and kind of doing a throwback to the AFL days, or those days when they used to have cards on the island. So it'll be cool, and personally, I'm excited to go to the island as well. Victoria is just a beautiful city.
Yeah, and they have that plan for the future as well. I noticed Rise FC 5 is slated to go September 7th, and also Rise FC 6 is going on November 30th, so definitely that plan going forward. But I understand you're a busy guy. You probably got a lot on the go today. Don't want to take up your whole time, so is there anything you want to add as a parting thought as we're wrapping up here, man?
I like your phrase there, parting shot, because that was my old podcast.
Yeah.
No, just I guess just thanks for having me on. First and foremost, and again, I love the work you're doing. I love seeing people still give the scene its due, and I think it's very important. Rise FC coming up here July 27th at the Q Center. Tickets, I believe there's some tickets still available. If not, you can watch that on Fight TV. They always do a good job on the broadcast. And other than that, check out my work on the Score. I'm doing sort of a one-man show over there, just trying to get as much coverage as I can, and really trying to get original content. That's the goal there with the Score, and they've been really great about it. And I'm really just trying to make my spot in this busy MMA scene. So appreciate the support, and your listeners can easiest way to get a hold of me is on Twitter at Lynch on Sports. That's LYNCH, and subscribe to the Score MMA YouTube channel. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I think you made great strides with the score in the last little while, and I think it's just going to continue to, grow exponentially. So best of luck with your efforts with the score, but also best of luck with the show coming up on, July 27th and everything, man. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks for all the insights.
Anytime, Dylan. I really appreciate it, man, and it was a pleasure coming on.